Hi there, out there in stage race land. This is Garth Reeder, Grand Race Commissioner. Um, Derek here is putting together a little podcast to give you one view and a little insight on equipment for stage racing and particularly for the Grand stage race. I've been doing stage races for over 10 years around the world. I did the Grand back in 2014 and have been involved with that race ever since. Um, and hopefully, what you'll see today will answer questions and guide some of your planning and selections for equipment in the future. Before we dive in, I sort of have a uh, rule of thumb, so to speak, with stage racing. The rule of thirds, what I call it. The first third is your training, getting ready for the race. That's important, and everyone realizes that. And you can work that with your personal trainers or on your own. The second third is your mental attitude into the race. And that starts, with your training and preparing, and then is very heavily reliant, important when you're actually doing the race, to having the mental fortitude to keep moving and to deal with the issues that come up is important. And the final third is what is the logistics. Now, that's sort of a big thing, and people like focusing on that also. Um, and it encompasses not only getting there, your plane tickets and sign ups and everything, but it also is your nutrition, which is super important. And you've heard from Elizabeth about that on the Facebook meetups and things like that, but also your equipment. Now, we've gone over some equipment in the past in other venues here. I want you also to realize that you should be looking at the rules and regulations. There's a lot of good information there of what you need, and ignorance is not an excuse of not reading it. Okay, it's incumbent upon you to look at that information out there in the website and go through the equipment section and understand that. Okay, now that a little high level things here on equipment. Equipment needs to be robust. It does not need to be the lightest. It doesn't need to be the most high performance. There's no reason to have a 1,000 lumen headlight in Grand. You don't need it. Okay. It does need to function for the entire time that you're there, and it needs to survive the environment. Okay. Um, and it's important that things are robust because you typically will only have one of everything. Yes, you will have two headlamps. Yes, you will have two shoes. Okay, but if one of your shoes fails, are you going to hop the rest of the way? You know, if you lose your fork, your spoon, how are you going to eat? Okay, so you got to keep that in mind and use that to guide some of your equipment selections. Okay. Second important thing, label everything with your name and or number. People lose equipment, whether through inattentiveness or just bad luck. It happens. And if you only have one sleeping bag and you lose your sleeping bag and no one knows whose sleeping bag that is, you're going to not finish the race. I've literally seen sleeping bags on the edge of the trail from people that have lost them. Okay. It happens all the time. People lose equipment. Your sunglasses, your hat, your buff, water bottles. Everybody, it happens. Label all your gear. It also will make check-in a lot easier for you. Okay. Now, um, there's some pieces of equipment that you need to focus a little bit more on than others. And it would be wise to invest uh, uh, in those pieces of equipment heavily as opposed to some other things. Typically, there's about three pieces of equipment that you should be focusing on. The first and most important is your sleeping system. There's uh, on the website there's a section regarding that and some important information there. Your sleeping system is your sleeping bag and your pad. You're going to need to rest and recover well during this race. So choose wisely, don't choose poorly, don't skimp there. If it's better to be a little extra warm and carry that extra ounce or so than it is to be cold and burn up precious fuel trying to stay warm at night. Okay. Um, the second thing to invest in wisely would be your pack. And I cannot stress this enough. This will take some testing on your part to find what works best for you. Um, there are many options out there for packs. Typically, something in the 20 to 24 liter range is sufficient for these races. Um, anything bigger than that becomes a temptation to fill with unnecessary equipment, or as the race progresses, becomes unwieldy because it's just extra bulk and rattling around and it doesn't fit well. But you're going to have to work hard. Yes, you can go ask, what types of packs do people typically use? And but unfortunately, what works for a petite female may not fit well for a strapping young kid. Okay, so you're gonna the fit of your pack is important. Um, what is interesting now is packs today are more a hybrid between a pack and a vest, which alleviates some of the fitting problems, but still you may have to try a couple different ones to find one that works best for you. Um, we'll go into that in a little bit more. Um, the third item that you may want to invest wisely in is your puffy, your warm jacket. Um, again, it doesn't have to be Arctic grade, but it still needs to be light and packed down reasonably well. Everything else is sort of secondary. There's no point in dropping big bucks on some of these little minor items to save 2 grams. It's better to invest in a good sleeping bag or a real good pack. Um, one or two final words of advice here before we go into individual things here. Um, you only really bring what you need to survive and to finish the race. Too many people overthink this, and Derek's seen this in the past too. They start the, oh well, what about this? What if this happens? What if that happens? And they start packing what I call the jigs, just in case. It's just in case I need this. Just in case I need a whole other set of clothes because mine burned up in the fire or whatever. It's you can get by with very little out there, and you can save yourself some serious weight by avoiding piling it on. Okay. Um, the last thing, and I know this is contentious, is phones. In reality, we used to race without phones. And I know people like it, for taking pictures and everything, but you'd be surprised the weight penalty and that goes along with bringing your cell phone along. So, but again, kits are personal. Kits are developed by each person to fit each person's needs and desires. So, keep that in mind. So, with that, I think Derek will just sort of jump into uh, individual pieces of equipment here. Um, I sort of have this divided up a little bit into, what's required and then some important personal or non-required pieces of kit that make a stage race go well.
Yeah, Garth,
So,
before we jump into all that, I kind of want to kind of just maybe summarize exactly what you just said because there's a lot of really good talking points in there. And I think kind of just to summarize what you said is like there's a balance between having too much gear and having too little gear and finding that perfect amount of comfort, but also not packing too much because if you pack too little, you'll be extremely uncomfortable. If you pack too much, you're going to be extremely uncomfortable. So it's
yeah,
kind of like finding that proper balance because in the end, it's like your comfort level is different than mine, for example. And maybe I can get by on a really, really small sleeping mat at night. And other people want something more comfortable that or maybe thicker, I should say, which will add more warmth and more comfort, but also you got to haul that around during the day. So it's like trying to find that like the proper middle ground because if you, like I was just saying, I guess if you carry too much gear, you have to haul that throughout the day for 50K or 50 miles. And that's just kind of miserable. But then if you don't have enough, you get back to your campsite at night and you're freezing all night. And so it's just really trying to find like the perfect amount or the right amount of gear or the proper gear for you personally.
yeah, that's true. And you can look at it from a different perspective of trade-offs. Okay, do I want a nice warm sleeping bag and keep my pack weight down to X, or do I want to have a colder sleeping bag or a heavier pack by bringing my phone and battery pack? Okay, what's your trade-off? I mean, and that's just trading off equipment. We're not even going into trading off, well, do I want to bring, uh, spare clothes or more food? So it's an optimization problem, and the solution for each individual is different. And I know people want to hear, go buy this color of socks and you'll finish grand to grand. It's up to you, what equipment you want to trade off, what food you want to trade off, what suffering you want to trade off, what comfort you want to trade off. It's up to you. We're
Yeah,
just giving you the lanes to guide you a little bit down that path.
I think that's part of the fun of it personally. I think logistics are super interesting and fun and part of the cool thing about stage racing, more so than just like a standard like say 50K or any other sort of ultra is like you get to experiment with a lot of different things. And there's a couple that's gonna be racing grand to grand this year and they've been trying out different freeze dried meals. So they'll go out and do like an overnight backpacking trip or maybe go for a long run and then eat that afterwards and just see how they feel and they've been posting it to their stories on Instagram. And it's been really interesting to see the different meals they've been trying out. They've been looking at the calorie density and how they're able to like adjust things to make it more packable. And I think that's a really good strategy. And it's also kind of fun. It's like, I'm going to try out like whatever clam jambalaya, whatever backpacking meal that maybe
Yeah,
sounds good in the moment, but
it's
maybe
really
not after a
amazing,
long
Derek.
run or
I mean,
something.
over the
So
last
it's a
10
fun process
years,
to be able to do that.
um, the improvement in equipment and food that has occurred. Uh, for history buffs, I don't know if I can't remember. There's a documentary called Marathon of the Sands. I think that's the name of it, and it was made in the 80s, and it talked about the early and showed some of the early MDS It's about the early MDS races that were out there. You go look that up and look at the equipment that that they were using then versus what we're using today. It's night and day. It's night and day. So
Yeah, it was funny. Some friends of mine a couple years ago did a film about this classic trail run in Tucson, which is just this is the Bear Canyon Loop, and it's a very popular loop. It's fun. It's like a 17-ish mile loop, and for whatever reason, it was just kind of a classic run in the area. And they did a documentary about the guys they did initially and like how things have evolved over the years. And it was just so interesting to see them just running with almost nothing. Like, oh, here's like a handheld water bottle, but it's like a syrup bottle. And that's what you would use to for water because there were no specific gear for running at that time as far as like handheld water bottles go.
yeah,
And so
you
we are,
use the syrup bottles.
yeah. Yeah, like it sounds funny now, but it's like at the time, it's like, well, that just made sense. But then things have evolved over the years, like so your shoes have evolved, socks and nutrition and all things have evolved. And it's like we have all these really cool opportunities to be able to experiment with this stuff. And it's like it's a fun thing to do. And like same thing with like your sleeping system and your backpack and whatever. It's like things
Mhm.
have evolved and it's fun to be able to play with those different technologies.
Yeah. One other point before we dive in here is that what we're going to talk about today is gear sort of centered around what I would call a high desert stage race. Now, if you're going to go and do something in, say, a subarctic region or with, you know, a jungle ultra, or your gear, your kit's going to be a little different. Just how it is. So you got to sort of pay attention to where the event's taking place and the conditions to expect there. And that's why the gear list, on Grand to Grand, um, is specific on certain things like your temperature of your sleeping rating of your sleeping bag. It can get cold. It can get hot. There can be torrential downpours, flash floods. We've seen all this at Grand to Grand over the years. It happens. Okay. And, screaming sun beating down on you. It's there. It's an adventure, but the equipment lists are there to help you finish the race.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I feel like that should be probably everyone's first, like maybe not talking point, but like point to consider when signing up for Grand to Grand. Just so you sign up for the event, and it's like, okay, let's look at the weather, and that's going to determine the pack you choose, the gear you choose, because like you're saying, like a sock designed specifically for Arctic conditions is not going to go well at Grand to Grand. But then also a very thin sock that's good in heat management is not going to do well in the Arctic. So I think it's almost like the top level consideration when choosing what gear and what equipment you're bringing to Grand to Grand.
Hmm. Right. Okay. Well, let's get at it. Um, First and foremost, a pack. Like I said earlier, it's a personal preference. For me, I've raced all my races with red light packs. Um, I've had multiple packs over the years. I've had even some. This was a pre-production model from Red Light. Um, Latest one I'm using right now is this one. Um, there's other like OMM, WA. Some of the U.S. manufacturers are coming out now. Looking at fast packing is a crossover between. So looking at those types of packs may uh, be something to do. One thing though that I personally like is having the front pack. Keep my food for the day and equipment that I need to get at quickly during the run is nice to have here. It balances out the weight a little bit on that. It also allows for storage in of certain items here that I've found good, um, and adds a little more space. Other people like Elizabeth, you might have heard on the nutrition thing. She doesn't like having this. They like having pockets in their pants. again, personal preference going on there. Um, so that's packs, quick and dirty. Okay,
Yeah,
there
speaking
you
of
go.
just real quick here, Garth, like what Elizabeth was saying the other day on the Zoom meetup was really interesting because her whole thing was for most stages except for the long stage, you don't really need to be taking your pack on and off. It's
You
gonna be a
shouldn't
time
be taking
killer
it
and
on
it's
and off. Yeah,
exhausting. Yeah, so if you can figure out a way that works for you to put your nutritional products in like in your pack in side pouches or front pouches, or if you want to use the front pack, and that works for you, that's great. And it's very personalized. Just because you use
yeah,
that doesn't mean that she's going to use that or vice versa. And like whatever is
yeah,
most efficient and practical for you is the best.
yeah. I don't even typically take my pack off during the long stage. It's a waste of time and effort. Um, but again, if you're a racer or a mid packer or a backpack walker, that also drives some of your selections here. Okay, so there's that. Um, Sleeping systems. Um, Again, I can't stress enough that one of the most important things to uh, consider when you're developing your kit. You're going to be spending more time typically in your sleeping bag than you are racing. You're going to be spending at least a third of the day in your sleeping bag. So you want to be warm, you want to be comfortable. So having a sleeping bag that is rated more for uh, comfort around 32 to or 0 Celsius is good as opposed to one that's an extreme rating. You can go look on the website and get a little more details there. Okay. Uh, Down is typically the one of choice. And the good thing about getting a nice sleeping bag is you do other going camping, whatever, you can use it a lot. It's reusable in other activities that you may be pursuing. Okay. Now, part of that not only is your sleeping bag, but is your pad. You have to have a pad for Grand to Grand. Um, it can be very rocky and uncomfortable. Uh, there's two choices. You can have an inflatable or you can have a foam pad. I have used both types. It sort of depends on what to expect. Um, they have their advantages and disadvantages. I typically, personally, almost exclusively use an inflatable. Uh, there's no real weight benefit one way or the other. They're about the same weight between an inflatable and a pad. It's more of a bulk issue. This is my Thermarest Neo Air that I've used for I don't know how many stage races. I've, knock on wood, never have had a puncture. If you're going to bring an inflatable to Grand, bring your repair kit because you can get a puncture very easily. The other thing I like about this is, I mentioned earlier, there's another place. This my inflatable fits right in there in my front pack. We'll talk a little bit about packing in a bit.
Yeah, the
Um,
actual pad selection to me, Garth, is interesting because like you just pulled out that pad and like that's what I would typically bring for like an overnighter or something. And that's partly because I just hate having to deal with an issue where I wake up in the middle of the night and I have a puncture. But then like you said, you've never had a puncture, so it's kind of like what fits your personality. Like personally, I'd rather have the little extra bulk and not worry about a puncture, but also the inflatable ones are way more comfortable. Like I own both and I definitely sleep
mhm,
better on an inflatable pad. But then I always have this idea in the back of my head, like, oh, I'm going to puncture tonight or something. So
yeah,
it's kind of like
right.
whatever works for you, right?
Yeah, whatever works for you. Um, if you're going to go with a foam, again, the Thermarest egg crate thing. Um, Pro tip here: you're only required to have it go from your head down to your knees, right? So if you look, this one is actually half size. You can cut it down. Um, You know, typically you're going to be strapping this to the outside of your pack. I've used this in stage races in Texas, and I used these when I did a fastest known time on the Monumental Loop in southern New Mexico, just because of the issues with punctures where I was doing that. So again, you have choices. Uh, even elites use these. Your choice. What works for you. The thing is, this thing is way cheaper than an inflatable. And I've actually seen people um, cannibalize part of their sleeping pad for more padding in their shoes or on their packs.
Yeah, and just real quick, Garth, what are the rules and regulations regarding pads? Because I've seen like not so much at Grand to Grand, but just in through hiking, people use a very thin, like 1/8 inch thin sleeping pad, just enough to like get them off the ground. Is that something that's acceptable, or is that not really a
Well,
go at Grand to
so
Grand?
there's two issues with pads. One is the comfort collection, and that's again a personal preference. The other one is thermal conductivity. There is no requirement in Grand to Grand, but this is providing the insulation between you and the ground at night. It may be warm and it doesn't matter, and it comforts comes more in play. It may be really cold, and then thermal conductivity is more important. So again, choose wisely. That's sort of the joke with me. Choose wisely, don't choose poorly, kind of thing. And try it out. Again, if you're comfortable with just going with this, it's cheap. And if you try it and you don't like it, oh well, okay, get out the checkbook and go for something better. I would advise against the skeleton frame kind of blow-up pads. Those have typically not been very well received or functioned good in these environments.
Yeah, definitely. And like it's interesting how, like we spoke a little bit about this earlier, how the temperature swings can be so drastic at Grand to Grand, where
Mm-hmm.
generally, like, and this is in generalities here, but like the first couple nights are generally warmer, but then as you kind of progress up the grand staircase, things get
It gets
progressively colder.
colder,
And I've even
and
seen the
you're
last
more
night there's
caloric deprived, and it's harder to stay warm.
exactly, yeah, everything kind of compounds at that point.
Mm-hmm. Okay, water bottles. You need 1.5 liters of capacity. There's three options. A bladder, which I personally strongly recommend not to bring. They're too hard to fill up. They're a single point failure if you get a puncture in them. And bladders typically do not do well in stage races. So that leads floppy flasks or hard bottles. I'm a hard bottle fan. I've had too many floppy flasks fail. Additionally, most flasks, soft flasks, are only 500 milliliters, so you need to take three. If one of those fails, you're in a world of hurt. I typically use the hard water bottles. I've used several different types, 750 milliliters with the straw. I usually wear mine up front, easy to get to, kind of thing. Um, I usually have one only for water and the other one for uh, recovery drinks, electrolyte stuff, tailwind, that kind of thing. They also stand up better. They're quicker to fill at the aid stations and the like. Never had one of these fail. I've had soft flats fail. I see soft flats fail every single year. But if that's what you want to go with, good luck. And make sure you have a backup plan because sometimes people wind up getting the the little water bottle from the store and carrying that. Some people do that. But again, that little hole to try and fill it up is a pain.
Yeah, I actually have a handheld soft flask right now, and I have a few that are the exact same bottles, the same brand and everything, just because I like them. And one of them has a very small pinprick in it, not enough where it actually leaks out like any substantial amount of water. But if I accidentally choose that and go for a run, it's just slowly dripping out the entire run, so my hand gets soggy, and it's kind
Yeah.
of annoying. It's maybe only like a few milliliters every run, but it's enough where it's just kind of an annoying thing to think about. So
Hmm.
hydration wise, it doesn't matter, but it is another annoyance that could happen throughout the race. So
Right.
just a little story there.
Okay. Next thing, the headlamps. There's a couple rules with the headlamps. One is that they be 200 lumens, and one is that the other is that you have two of them, and the third is that you have spare batteries for them. I typically bring two of the same headlamps. Yeah, one's orange, one's black, whatever. And that way, where is it? Oh yeah, here it is. I only have to bring one spare battery pack. If you bring two different headlamps, you got to bring two different kinds of batteries. That's how it is. Don't go overboard. Um, 200 lumens is way more than enough to do this race. Yeah, I know, Bigfoot might be out there and all, but when you start bringing all sorts of heavy duty headlamps, you're burning through batteries, especially if you're out there later at night on the all night during the long run, and your pack weight can go up significantly. Um, you can get acceptable headlamps like from Black Diamond for $40 a piece. I mean, they're not really that expensive. And if you're going to use something other than a rechargeable, then I would strongly urge you to use the lithium batteries. You can pick those up in the States or in town, so you don't necessarily have to fly with them. I know it's a pain. Pro tip, I put a little bit of tape over one of the contacts so they don't get shorted out. Lithium's the way to go. Much a third lighter and lasts longer. Okay. The final on headlamps, you need the red blinky light. Um, the best one I've ever found is this Silva little button light. It is they're hard to find, but super light. You can get something equivalent at the bicycle shop. They're usually only about that big. Okay. You only need one of them, and you're only going to need it for one stage.
Inger,
Pretty.
I'm sorry, just thinking about what you mentioned earlier and then what you're saying now about headlamps and just electronics in general, that it's really easy to overdo it with the intensity of the light. And like I have a few different headlamps personally and different bike lights. And the really strong, heavy duty ones, yeah, they cast a really bright light. But they also weigh a lot more and they consume a lot more power. And then you're potentially bringing an extra battery bank. And I've made this mistake when like going backpacking and stuff where I'm like, I want this newest, coolest battery bank that charges super fast and has this high power output, but it also weighs double and it doesn't really do much more than
Mhm.
the standard one that weighs half as much. And so in reality, you're kind of not splitting hairs, but you're trying to find the happy medium here of the proper
Right.
amount of light, but then not bringing one that's like sounds cool and the marketing's really cool because it has super fast charge, quick charge, this, and that. It's like you don't really need it at grand to grand because you want a light
No.
that works and is lightweight, and that's really all you need it for. You're not out there
It,
racing a
you know,
Baja 5000.
actually, right. And quite honestly, many of the courses marked well, where there's going to be nighttime running. There's reflectos on the trail. Um, Pro tip: a lot of runners may not burn their headlamp at the highest level. They might dial it back down to 100 lumens or 80 in certain sections. If you're running with other people, having a couple people running and going at 100, at lower, you can see fun. It might be a full moon out too. I mean, that's awesome running at night with no headlamp. That's pretty cool. Kind of thing. Yeah, and you're right. You really don't need the giant headlamps. On the other end, the spectrum, the little tiny micro headlamps, those, those wind up being problems. And we've seen headlamp failures. We've seen headlamp people losing them, and that's why it's important to have them and have a good, robust headlamp. Again, there's inexpensive headlamps out there. 200 lumens is fine. Uh, that's all you need.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just kind of finding the right tool for the right job. And maybe if you were running a 100-mile race or something, you'd have a higher intensity light that you could swap out at every aid station. But since it's a little bit different, as far as like packing gear goes, you got to find the right tool for the right job.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, moving on. I carry with me safety pins. I mean, not only do you have to have safety pins to pin your numbers on and everything, but they're a good thing to have along. I typically carry, what's needed to pin my number on, right? But then I also carry a couple extra and a couple big ones in case I need to pin something to my pack or that kind of thing. Good thing to have along. A compass. Um, Many races require you to carry a compass. Um, I come from an orienteering background. I used to do that when I was a kid, and I've done it, done many events and races even into my age here. Um, the little button compasses that are plus or minus 90 degrees, I mean, in theory, they meet the requirement, but how useful they would be, and if you're able to use them, that's another story. I typically just take a regular compass and I take the capsule. I don't keep the base plate, I just take the capsule. And if you know how to do this, this is a good navigation tool as you can get. I encourage you, if you don't understand how to use a mapping compass, you will not have to use a mapping compass, but it is good to have and good to understand. Go find some place, take some courses, go to the orienteering club. It's great. It's fun. Okay. I've used these like when I did MDS. Tactically, I made some good decisions when I did my first MDS with this. So anyway, you just need the capsule from the compass. I typically carry a small lighter with me for emergency purposes. It's not required, but that's what I do. We don't want people lighting fires in Utah. I mean, there's no reason to. You'll have hot water, etc., and there'll be campfires at camp as appropriate. But I carry it as a piece of emergency gear. Let's see here. Knives. Fun subject. Let's see here. No crocodile, Bundy, whoever, Bowie knives, right? Typically, I bring a skeleton knife with. I bring multiple knives with me. I bring a small skeleton knife like this, and I have this attached to my front pack. So I don't, one, don't lose it, and two, I can get to it to open up food packets and things. I saw an individual when I was racing in Iceland, couldn't open his food pack. His hands were so cold, And for me, it was just, oh, here, let me help you. And, you need this. There's other knives out here, like these little tiny razor knives that you can use. I also carry a small knife in my foot kit that has a pair of scissors in it. We'll go into that in a bit. So having a knife is important. Um, being able to access it is important. And sometimes it's always good to have a couple of them. Okay, that's nice. Signal mirror. You can get these plastic ones. This is a micro star flash. This is the one I carry. To keep it from getting scratched up, I wrap it up in a little bit of cellophane and keep it in my pack. Know how to use it. Read the instructions, practice if you really need it. Okay. The whistle, piece of safety equipment, typically on your pack. You know, some headlamps have them on the back. Just make sure you have one. Survival sheet. You have a couple options in Grand Grand. You're not required to bring a survival bivy, just a sheet. You can just have the standard, old school one. Sometimes it's been good to have a survival poncho. These are acceptable if you want to bring that. Okay, pretty straightforward. I always bring my own salt tablets. If there might be some at the aid stations. It might be the brand you like, but it would be a good idea to plan on that and bring your own supply. Again, this is about self-sufficiency and not depending on others as you go along. Eating stuff. Typically for me, I do my meals in Ziploc bags and use those as my eating utensil bowl. But I do carry with me my spork. And I prefer the short handled ones. They have long. Here's a long handled one. You can see the difference. If you're going to eat out of the standard bags that most meals come in, the long handled one's better to get down deep. Some of the freeze dried packets are the openings on the side, so you can get into it easy instead of down through the top. They don't need to be titanium. The aluminum ones are perfectly fine and only weigh 3 milligrams more, but cost 1/5 the amount. I always carry with me a small cup because I like coffee in the morning. Many people like coffee and tea. So this is, for me, a critical piece of equipment kind of thing. Sometimes I pack like my pad in this and keep up the volume down, that kind of thing. You don't need a giant, huge one. You don't need a kettle. You don't need any of that. You just need your cup. If you just want to bring an old soup can, fine. That's great. Okay. Some people do bring collapsible bowls or plates. I'm not a big fan of it, but that's your choice. One little tip is I sometimes bring a little bit of aluminum foil with me. If it's windy and the sand's blowing, and you can put it over my coffee cup, keep the sand out, that kind of thing. Lay it on the ground, put things on it that I'm eating, that kind of thing. Hold it up, reuse it later. A little bit. First aid medications. Again, this is self-sufficiency. You can't depend on going to the med tent for all your ailments. This is my med kit that I typically bring with me. It has everything that I need, a handful of medications to get me through the race if needed. Okay, typically I put in a little bit of a couple band-aids, a gauze pad, some suture strips if I have a big cut, couple alcohol wipes, 5 or 6 vitamin pills, pain medications, whether you like the aspirin or um, Tylenols or whatever you use. I also typically bring antidiarrheal medications in case you get an upset stomach, decongestants, and some cough drops, that kind of thing. But that's it. That's all there is. It fits in here in this little pack, and that's my med kits. You know, couple 2 or 3 doses to get you through. That's it. Along with that, you saw my blister kit, similar kind of packaging. Typically, I bring enough tape and supplies to retape my foot, or the places that typically I tape, 2 additional times in the field. If you tape your shoulders or your back, you might want to have enough to redo that once or twice in the field. Of course, you've taped up before the first stage. Trail Toes has always been very good at providing blister kits, and what they have in here, you know, the little needles and wipes and alcohol wipes and all that is typically sufficient for the race. You know, you don't need giant 50-yard rolls of rock tape take with you. I've seen that. I've seen it. You know, giant rolls of rock tape. No. Take what you need. Okay, you're not going to be providing tape for everybody, and typically you're not retaping every night. Okay. So sometimes you have the little blister compete things, that kind of deal. Antibacterial ointment in there a little bit. We've seen infected cactus spine on the toe things, and it happens. So anyway, the blister kit. Now, as I said, you bring what you need. You're going to need some sunscreen. That's about all you need if you're judicious about it. I've seen people bring 16-ounce bottles of sun. You don't need it. You know, take what you need to get by. Okay, that goes to the same with, like, if you're really into doing your hands with the antibacterial gel stuff, you know, a couple ounces is all you need. Okay, you can repackage it. I would, whatever lip stuff you like, I would encourage you to bring that. I would also encourage you to make sure you bring a supply of Desert Dollars, Mountain Money, toilet paper, just so you have it during the day. Okay. All right. On the hygiene side of things, I bring a couple other little items uh, for daily use. Um, for brushing my teeth, I use these little things called wisps. They're a disposable toothbrush. They have inside them a little gel toothpaste. They also have a little toothpick. I use one of these a day at night before I go to bed, then you can throw them away. You don't need to bring, if you're going to bring a reusable toothbrush, it's like get the little tiny toothpaste that you get from the airplanes, from overseas flights. That's great. Cut the handle off if you want. I always bring some Q-tips, but the big thing I use are these easy towels. I bring about 10 or so of these. You add a little water and they come into a little hand towel. Wipe off, wipe your face, wipe your body a little bit. Throw them away. These are great. I use these a lot. You buy them on Amazon and comes in a big pack. You might have seen them like at the restaurant, fancy restaurants, to wash your hands. Anyway, so I
Hey,
usually bring a supply of that. And as the race goes on, this depletes and it gets lighter. And it's good.
hey Garth, what's your reasoning for carrying the little wisp disposable toothbrushes versus just a small toothbrush with a little tiny toothpaste?
Preference. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, it's nice to have a nice clean one. Your toothbrush didn't get jammed in the dirt, kind of thing. It's just how it is. And the thing is, when I'm, I guess, in the, it's about the same weight. It really is. The thing is, the wisps get used up, and your equipment is dead weight. It's not like food. I mean, it is it is what it is, and you will, when you cross the finish line, you will have that, right? Okay. Um, and just for me to be able to get rid of a little bit, and only bring what you need, that's just, it's a preference, personal preference.
It makes sense. Just
Yeah.
curious.
Um, now, um, I'm going to show you some other items that I have found to be quite useful in stage racing. And these are what I sort of term emergency supplies. These are my just in case things. They're more general in nature, and they're there mainly for repairs on the trail. And I will say, every single one of these has been used in a stage race before, and you can bring them if you want. You don't have to. I mean, um, some of the things that I like bringing, um, spare shoelace, or this, in this case, this is a little bungee cord in case I need to tie something to the pack, or a shoestring breaks and that kind of thing. I went over the safety pins and the aluminum foil. I always bring a little piece of repair tape in case I melt my jacket. My jacket. In case you get too close to the fire and you melt your jacket, fix it. And the down doesn't leak out, right? Okay. Little roll of duct tape, fix things, rip in your pack. Um, oh yeah, believe it or not, we've used zip ties before, assorted sizes. This is just sort of in my possibles bag. Let's see, what else do I have? The aluminum foil, we went over that. Um, Oh yeah, I typically bring a little needle and thread wrapped around a card in case I have to sew something together. Um, a rip in a pack. We've seen that before, and it's there if you need it. I mean, all these things are just an ounce or so. It's really not that big of a deal, but they've been used and make it so you can get over the finish. Okay. Um, Sometimes I bring this vet wrap tape. It's sort of self-sticky. It's like having an ace bandage. It's super lightweight, but sometimes I bring it, sometimes I don't. Um, these should be on the recommended list. Earplugs. Bring 2 sets of them because you will lose one. And your tent mates will snore, roll around, burp, fart, whatever, and it helps you get a good night's sleep. Um, One of the big things that I utilize in my kit are the Ziploc bags. Um, I will use assorted sizes from the snack size uh, to quarts to gallons. I might like pack my day rations in one of these. Um, and the good thing about using the Ziplocs is, as opposed to vacuum sealing, is you can reseal it. You can move stuff around. You can use this to hold stuff during the day. It's like my daily rations. I'll get up and I'll have my cup and my fork and my coffee in there and my little packet of sugar or whatever. And I got this, and with my breakfast kind of thing, I can reuse this, and when I'm done, I can throw it away. Um, you may have seen in some of these things that, like, all these little odds and ends, I have extra heavy duty Ziplocs called lock sacks. They're sort of like mil spec. I use these to hold all these little personal items here, in there, and that's keeps them organized, kind of thing. Um, my blister kit's in there, in one of these, has my name on it, and so these can be reused race after race. You don't need to buy them, but they come in convenient sizes. Um, oh yeah. Um, the other good thing about the Ziplocs is if it's inclement weather and it's raining, it keeps a lot of your stuff dry, because most race packs are not waterproof. And if there's several things you want to keep dry, one of them is your sleeping bag. The second one is your jacket, your puffy jacket. Okay. I typically will pack those 2 items in a dry bag. And if it's really looking like bad weather, I'll put them in a plastic bag inside my dry bag. Um, One of the last races I did was in New Zealand, and we had a very, very bad rainstorm. Many people were out on the trail and wearing their down jacket, etc., getting it soaked, and eventually they had to evacuate 7 competitors off the course because of hypothermic conditions. I kept all my stuff dry, got into camp, got out of my wet clothes and into my dry bag, and started eating my dinner. That was good. So, these are the kind of things you need to take into account. Having an extra Ziploc to put your socks, your spare socks, and your long sleeve shirt in. Yeah, there you go. It'll be dry for you when you get to camp.
I think this all comes down to just proper planning and self responsibility, and maybe
Yeah.
just like before we head out to the rim of the Grand Canyon for the start, like, oh, let's check the weather, and then realize the
It,
weather's might change during the week.
one thing that I found really incredible about stage racing is if you're if you're you are you're planning everything all the time. I mean, your time in camp from when you finish, okay, I gotta do my recovery. I'm gonna take care of my feet. I'm gonna eat my dinner. I'm gonna, on and on, all this. You get up in the morning. I'm eating my breakfast. I'm getting my pack ready for the next day. You know, or for the next stage. It's this constant mental thing going on, planning as best you can. Things will go sideways, but as best you can uh, for the what's coming up. Okay. Um, I also bring with me a little bit of uh, sports slick kind of stuff, the trail toe stuff, same thing on that. So that what I've gone through here, with the exception of instead, I like to bring a little notebook and a pen or a pencil, do a little journaling, writing down things I learn as I go along, kind of thing. It's sort of neat for a record. It's old school kind of deal instead of doing a video thing or whatever. Um, I think that covers most of the gear per se. I mean, I can touch a little bit on clothing. You know, I typically bring very minimal clothes. I bring one pair of shorts, one short sleeve shirt, one long sleeve shirt, a pair of tights. My puffy, my rain jacket, a hat for my balding head, um, a buff, the multifunction buff. Sometimes I will bring gaiters, depending on the race. Grand to grand, I would encourage you to have some sort of gaiter. The big piece of clothing that I really like are the cooling sleeves. These are made by Zoot. When I race in the desert, I wear these cooling sleeves, not to keep your arms warm. These are real lightweight, and the sweat. It's weird. You can just feel it evaporating off. It's pretty neat. Um, and then socks. I have a sock fetish. I usually bring three pairs of socks on a stage race, various kinds. Some in gingy, some not, some heavy, some light, kind of thing. Taking care of your feet is so important. And for me, having good socks is important. Um, with that, I'm going to touch on a couple items that are very subjective. Again, one is the phone, right? Um, some people also like to bring slippers at camp to pad around in. I'm not one of those. What I will typically do is get to camp, um, take care of my feet, put on a clean pair of socks, loosen my shoes and take my insoles out, and then use those for slippers. Okay. But some people have to have their Crocs or flip flops to walk around. That said, there's a lot of cactus plants out in the desert, and people put them through their flip flops and into their toes.
Yeah,
Um,
Garth, thinking about that, like, because I know a couple of the camps can get rather pokey, or there's just kind of hidden pokey stuff because it's the desert and it is what it is. But like, how common is it for people to maybe like take care of their feet while running, but then they get to camp and they kick a cactus or they just step on little like goat heads or thorny things?
it happens to everyone. I mean, it does. People will get the cactuses in their legs. Like I said, one guy got a real long cactus thorn through his shoe on the first stage into his big toe, and it broke off. And for the longest time, he thought he had this heat blister going. And on the third day, the medics, oh, you still have a cactus thorn in here. Pulled it out. Oh, that feels so much better. Kind of thing, the elephant and the mouse thing, or the lion and the mouse. Um, so yes, there is thorns, particularly in the earlier stages. Um, there are insects and creatures running around too. It's just part of the game in the desert. But like I said, for me, I just take my insoles out, lay them out, let them dry out, and I just walk around in my shoes with the extra space in it, with the laces undone. Easy enough. One of the other more personal, contentious things is the use of poles. Personally, I don't use poles for most races. Grand Duran can definitely be done without poles, but some people like them and will utilize them. Um, my only comment there is be considerate when you're poling around other people. There you go. Uh, again, it's something that you're carrying with you um, at all times. You may have them in your pack or whatever. So, again, focusing on bringing what you need. Um, yes, you can have a couple little emergency things, but they're general in nature. Don't overdo the clothes. Don't overthink it. Okay. Literally, what I've showed you, I've used in stage races around the world and have not been in want of anything uh, or in need of anything, really. There's a lot of things you'll be in want of. I want a nice T-bone with, or ribeye with buttery baked potato, but, on day 4. So, choose wisely, don't choose poorly. Um, Derek, I want to make one other comment here before we sort of wrap it up. Um, the supported category. Um, while you do have some leeway in the supported category, you are going to have to make some decisions and trade-offs regarding, what you bring. It's not unlimited. The weight limitations of 12 kilos, particularly with your food, will force you to make some decisions regarding um, equipment and clothing you bring. And it's there for a reason. So you begin to understand this step into stage racing and learning what you can really do without and what you are capable of doing with limited supplies. And so pay attention, uh, choose wisely there. Yeah, you might be able to get a little warmer sleeping bag or bring some extra treats, but you're still going to have to make some decisions on your equipment as you go along. So
Yeah, I think it's gonna be
turn
really
it over to you, Derek.
yeah. Let's kind of wrap up everything that you said, and because we spoke a lot about the gear and like kind of walking through it and everything, but I think in the end too, like you could have the best gear, the best coach, whatever, but if you're not practicing these things, then they're not really gonna feel natural on race day. So what are your thoughts about like using a training run to test your gear or using, I don't know, like your weekends as like kind of like a sample or a test day for the race?
Well, you touched on it. You gotta practice with these things. And you gotta know what you have and what you can use it for, right? Yes, you're gonna do pack runs. You're gonna do pack runs, right? And guess what? You're when you get your kit sort of figured out. Yeah, my equipment and spare clothes is going to weigh around, oh, I don't know, 7 pounds, 3 kilos, whatever. Okay, that should be your base for running pack runs, right? Eventually, work your way up to it and all. Um, learning learning how to, you know, prepare your meals in Ziploc bags, or uh, tricks like using your shoes for a pillow instead of bringing one, or your pack full of extra food for a pillow. You can go on these camp outs, the kids think it's all cool to eat dehydrated meals. So maybe one night you have dehydrated meal, you know, we're going to try chicken cacciatore or whatever it is you're going to try, right? Um, your clothing, what works for you under what temperature ranges, nobody's going to tell you what to wear when you're out there. Um, so it's going back to what I said before, the 1/3 mental part. That's sort of the game here. What can you get by with and without? So, just put that in the back of your mind. Can you really go for a run without your phone and listening to music? It's different, for many people.
Yeah, and I think like to kind of wrap all that up, like it's like you were saying with the dehydrated meals, like just have fun with it. Like if you want to go out camping with your kids, like yeah, have dehydrated meals because they might think it's a fun, enjoyable thing, but you can also be kind of multitasking there and like testing stuff foreground to ground, like sleep in your sleeping
Hmm.
kit that you would use and see how comfortable you are in certain temperatures and that sort of thing. Because in the end, like you have to practice these things, otherwise race week's gonna be kind of like a trial by fire, and it may or may not be the most enjoyable week of your life.
One of the biggest practice things that I've always been a fan of is, and you can do it under different conditions, but practicing the back to back kind of runs. Um, and if you know, put your kit together, and it's sort of like a little mini stage race. I mean, you don't have to go do 30 or 40 miles. You can go out with your pack, with your kit, and go for a 10, 15-mile run, 20 kilometers, whatever. And you get home, but you're not going to do the burger and the beers and the chips. You're going to, okay, this is my recovery drink. I drink my recovery drink. And then later that night, you eat your meal. And then at night, you might want to, even if it's just sleeping on the floor inside or out on the deck, sleep in your sleeping kit. And then get up in the next morning, on Sunday, and eat your race breakfast and all. And then do it again and just see how that goes and see what you find out. And it's like, it's sort of like doing a controlled stage race kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of things are like fairly simple if you just think about it for a moment. Like you don't have to go, I don't know, drive 4 hours and do some big massive trip to go test your gear. You can do it on your
No,
local
you just
trails or at home.
go out of your house, go out of your apartment, go out of the flat. You can do it. I mean, it's not ideal conditions, but it gives you the flavor of what's going on, what you need to start really worrying about, what you don't need to worry about, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, cool, Garth. That was really interesting. I think it's really informative and it was a lot of fun to hear about how you've kind of set up gear throughout the years at various stage races you've done.
Yeah. If people out there have questions, shoot them out there. Shoot them to me. We'll figure it out.
Yeah,
Hope to see
definitely.
you
And like,
in September.
yeah, and I guess real quick, just thinking about that, like in the Facebook group, there's a lot of information and knowledge there. And maybe it's not 100% applicable to you, but you can kind of glean certain aspects of it and apply that to yourself. And maybe don't just kind of think like, oh, well, so and so wore this sock, so I'm going to wear this sock without testing it. Like you should probably test it first, but it can be a really good starting point and maybe help you like think through some problems or issues that you're having in training.
Yeah, once you zero through the selection process, yeah, it might be a little time consuming and cost a little bit of money, but once you got it dialed in, it's dialed in. And for the most part, you have, like for me, it's just like, yeah, this is all in a bag, and okay, now I just got to get some food, and these are the foods I like, and we're all good. So,
Yeah, definitely. And I guess like you were just saying, see everybody in a few months in September in Canab.
okay.